All right, it is 12:03. We'll call the Vermont Community Broadband Board meeting to order. It's December 12th. First on our agenda is a roll call and then approval of the agenda. We have 4 board members present. We have Holly. I'm sorry, Holly's not here. Holly's going to be late, but we have Laura, Dan, Brian, and myself. Staff members. Christine, do you want to run down staff who is present?
Yeah, we have Kristen Bringa is here. Let's see, Alyssa is here. And I think, is that it? Lucy is here. Lucy was here. She's, I think.
Stan is here. You see Stan?
Tracy.
Tracy, oh yeah, okay. I've got to click on the more. Yeah, Tracy's here as well. Okay.
And Heron.
I'm Heron. Great.
Okay.
We've got everybody but Rob at this point, and Adam Bornstein's not joining us either. So.
Okay. Thanks for that rundown. And Holly should be here later in the meeting, but she had an unexpected, something came up unexpectedly, so she'll be late. What I'd like to do is move on the agenda. I'd like to move the item number 6, VCBB data and overbuild policy, till after the Bucuda update. I want to give Holly time to show up, so I'd like to move that item below, between 9 and 10 on our agenda. I'm going to make a motion to approve the agenda as I've listed with that change. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or any further changes?
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
Just a quick question, Patty. On the NTIA, we had an update in the weekly update. Will we have an opportunity to discuss that on the agenda as proposed? If not, I'd love to just have a moment or two for that.
Say that again. Which?
NTIA.
Do you want to add an item?
Yep, just a quick. I have
Okay.
a question on that, on the update that went out.
Do you want to do that just during general updates?
Sure.
On staff updates?
Okay, that's fine with me.
Okay. General updates, NTIA. All right, let's do that. All right, any other changes? Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. There's a motion on the floor in a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, first item on our agenda is number 2 for action approval of the November 28th board meeting minutes. I'll make a motion to approve those. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. Any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Meeting minutes carry as listed. Item 3 on our agenda, VCBB pre-purchase of materials policy update. Christine, can you tee us up with that?
Yes, the board in the we recognize that there are long lead times for a number of items, and of course they aren't getting any shorter. And the CUDs are going to have a need to order those materials ahead of their next phase of approval of grant. We did a similar thing in the pre-construction grant process. So our proposal is to allow, and you have a resolution that was sent around, which basically the resolution would say we allow the CUDs with the permission of staff to order materials needed for the next phase of the project, and that allows them to get ahead in terms of inventory. Because what happens is, for example, if you've got a 6-month lead time, and we allow a grant to cover 24 months, but when you get into the 18th month, they're running out of money to reconstruct materials, and they will need to buy materials for their next phase. So similar to what we did with the pre-construction, we're asking to do with the construction grant process, which also to roll over any remaining pre-construction funds into the construction grants, and to allow this to continue to move forward. Stan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you summarized the resolution well. Thank you.
So, questions from the board?
Christine, was this at the initiative of the CUDs or Vicuda?
Yes. In fact, it was, I think it was something we missed when we did the original policy to allow pre-construction funds to be used to purchase material with long lead times.
Okay, I seem to recall when we did the pre-purchase of the fiber that we had some sort of strings attached to it so that in the event that the CUD didn't move forward, that the VCD would retain some sort of claw into that equipment, that we could keep it in.
Yeah, we would redistribute it. We would redistribute it that would to the other CUDs.
Is that same link?
Same rules would apply here, yes.
Okay, even if it's nuts and bolts and something minor?
Yes, we would want to.
Okay. That's the only question I have. Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah. So Christine, these are previously awarded grants and you want to release funds in advance of when they normally would be for pre-purchasing. Is that right? Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So then my question is, how will the board be updated about those decisions? When would we see that?
We would include that in our weekly update.
Okay, great. So we would see that XYZ CUD pre-purchased as part of their agreement, this amount of this thing.
Right. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Brian, you're up.
Yeah, just to confirm, so I'm sorry to be dense on this one, just to confirm. So these are funds already approved in the construction grant or the pre-construction grant. They're not an extension beyond those funds. It's not a future allocation. It's already been approved.
It hasn't. It's actually a future allocation. Similar. This is what we did with the pre-construction grant process, because
Laura asked that question and you answered it differently.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm hearing something different.
Yeah. Okay. That's why I wanted to clarify.
In other words, they haven't come. So it's this is what we did with the pre-construction grants. We recognized the fact that they had to order material ahead of time. We reviewed. You gave staff permission to review that and ensure that the materials were for the future phase in this particular case. But no, they're not we wouldn't be coming to you if they were already approved in the construction grant, because you've already given us permission to move funds around within approved grants.
Yep. So why wouldn't we just have them like do a pre-purchase of materials, grant addendum or a second grant or something to get those ordered in time, and we can allocate the funds upon a kind of a quick review, rather than this feels kind of carte blanche, and we're supposed to have some fiscal control and oversight. So
yeah, we were just following the model that was set up at the pre-construction. The board gave us the authorization.
Yeah, but that was a very different situation.
Now, Christine,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is Stan. I thought that this money was already included in the construction grant. It just wasn't in the phase that we were talking about. So for instance, if a CUD wanted to pre-purchase money, they could use money from a different phase. Isn't that what?
Yeah, except that phase hasn't approved yet. Remember what we've done. If we've established, we've limited the CUD's ability to apply for grants to a 24-month period. So we have not yet approved the next phase. So if you, and I'll go back to that example, if you're in month 18 and you've got a material lead time for your next phase, that's 1 year, you want to be able to purchase it a year ahead of time.
Yep. So
I have another question.
yeah, so just my last comment, Laura, would be just like, let's have them. I don't think it's, I'm not comfortable allocating or granting money that hasn't been applied for.
Okay, I mean that's an approach, and I understand the sensibility of your approach. I think Rob has his hand up, but Laura, you're next. But I'd love to hear Rob's, because that works as well.
Yeah, let's hear from Laura, and then we'll open it up to Rob.
Yeah, I'm still not actually clear on what we're doing here. So I believe that CUDs have two sets of money, two sets of funds through the VCBB. One is a quote unquote allocation that we have determined that they can, an amount that they can apply up to. And the other is the actual funds that they have applied for. Do I have that correct?
Yes, you
those
do.
are the two things. Okay. So is it, are you asking for approval from the allocation or from the grant already granted, already applied for grant funds?
We're asking for money from the allocation.
Okay, so then I actually agree with Brian on this. I'm nervous about doing that.
Agreeing with me? You're nervous about agreeing with me, Laura? I totally
I'm
understand
not.
that.
No, I love to agree with you. Whenever that happens, it makes me very happy.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's funny. All right, let's hear from Rob and see if we can get any more color on this.
Yeah, and I think actually I actually think we're saying the same thing, but we're coming at it from different angles and maybe talking past each other. The request here was simply that if there are already approved funds that you have reviewed that are part of either pre-construction or construction that have not been spent, that if the CUD chooses to make an allocation towards future materials, kind of using it as cash flow, that they can do so. I guess you could say there's some risk in that because it does move things around. They currently don't feel they have that flexibility. They're just looking for that flexibility to get ahead of supply chain issues. They are not asking for a new allocation or new funds or something that would come in a future grant phase.
Well, they already had that permission, Rob.
Correct,
Rob,
but the language in pre-construction is very clear that that it was for phase one.
But Rob, wait a second. We're eliminating the pre-construction grants. That money rolls into the construction. We want to close the pre-construction grant program. Otherwise, we have to keep this open for the entire period. So either way, it's the same thing. They haven't yet got an approved grant to spend that money. That's the issue. That's why we're talking about the difference between an allocation and an approved grant. There's an allocated amount. The CUDs have come in and applied for a grant for X dollars, right? Now they want to add to that to be able to pre-purchase. That's what
we were not asking to expend new dollars.
Well, then
we were asking for flexibility within the pre-construction programs, which are not closed out today, and any approved grant to get ahead on future grants. So we were not asking for an expansion of any allocation. That's not what we were asking for.
No. Allocation and grants are different. You make careful with your terminology here.
We were not asking for any new funds that had not been previously authorized to be added.
Granted.
We were just asking for flexibility within pre-construction and any grants that exist, that they have some flexibility to buy ahead towards a future grant, which is what they did with pre-construction previously.
Yeah, the board's already given the staff authority for that. The board has explicitly said, as long as we don't exceed the amount of the grant, we have the authority to move around line items.
Okay. We said that in pre-construction. Did we say that in construction as well?
Yeah, you said that in construction as well.
Okay, thank you.
So we may have misunderstood in our conversations with staff. The way I understood it, there was a limitation on pre-construction funds in particular, that there was some limit on the way they could be applied, particularly to a second phase construction grant that hasn't been.
Let me say, Rob.
Stan may
If
have
you-
the details of this. I may
Hang
not have it.
hang on, Rob. What I'm saying, I'll just say what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you haven't spent the money within your grant, whether it's pre-construction or construction, you are authorized to purchase those materials. But if you exceed the previous pre-construction grant that you have applied for, then we need to come back to the board because the board. Oh, well, I am confused. I'm sorry. We already have the authority to do that.
Yeah, we may have just
And I
not.
apologize to the board for bringing this up.
It's okay.
We can move on.
Patty, I have another question.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead, Laura.
Christine, I apologize if this information is very easy for me to find. I have not actually gone and looking for it, but would I be able to find up on the in our documents the allocation per CUD and the current amount that they have been granted out of that allocation? Does that exist for us?
It can exist for you. I don't know if it exists for you at this point on the website. I'm not intimately involved with the website, but yes, of course, we can make that available to you.
I would be interested in just having that as a document that we can kind of regularly. I'm not looking for mega detail here, just kind of the big macro numbers of where we're at, just to have a sense.
Is that
we can make
possibly that could be added to the dashboard?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we do have that the dashboard already, don't we,
We do?
Alyssa?
We've talked about
And-
this. How
Yeah.
much is allocated and how much is spent?
Yeah, yep. So we are tracking how much is allocated. That is what is being built for us to present in January, is the looking back at the pre-construction funding. Because most of the dashboards I was building was for the construction grants. So we have to do some looking back at some of the reports from the pre-construction, but that is what is planned for the January dashboard update.
Great.
So you will
Thank you.
have that. Yep. Thank you, Alyssa.
Super.
That was easy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is no action is required on this issue because it's.
Yeah, it's up. Brian has had it.
The funds are already granted. They've already been awarded through the VCBB process. And it's essentially repurposing those funds for purchase of materials for future phases or future equipment that we've already discussed apparently.
Yeah, those are line item issues, not grant issues.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board? Any more discussion on this item? All right, hearing none. Let's
Patty.
close out.
Apologies.
worries.
Just one more, maybe for a future agenda item. It's occurring to me that we haven't really gotten any updates on the progress on the grants. And so it would be good if I think we should have something like that happen periodically, whether it's annually or semi-annually.
Yeah, you know, again, can you hold that thought till after you see the dashboard? We intend to have all that incorporated into the
For the
dashboard.
grants? For the grants,
yes.
Christine?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Laura, when you say progress, do you mean how much money's been spent?
Well, I'm thinking about, what we're saying right now, which is we want the CUDs to have flexibility to pre-purchase with grant funds that have already been awarded to them. And yes, I absolutely do. But we have a duty to make sure that we have, that we're providing some oversight. And so we have to be able to understand kind of where things are at with these at some point. I mean, not at a micromanaging level, but we do need to check in on those. So.
Agreed.
Yeah, and to close on that, that was our intent with the dashboard, is to give you the
Awesome.
ability to see all that progress in the dash. So the January meeting, we're going to present that dashboard, and hopefully we've captured all those things that you need to see in terms of progress. But if not, we can you know, we'll be flexible in terms of being able to add to the dashboard.
That sounds awesome. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on this line item? All right, hearing none, let's move on to item 4, which is Northern Borders Shared Services Capacity Grant. Jane, you want to tee that up?
Yes, on this one, I'm going to turn that over to, in Rob Fish's absence, Rob V is going to take that one. You ready for that, Rob V?
Sure.
And
I think,
Lucy.
yeah, Lucy's going to help, and Ellie may help as well on this. So just to back up to the last meeting, when we, well, let me go back a couple meetings. We are aware that the Northern Borders Regional Commission has funds available for broadband. And in fact, I think we confirmed this morning something which I didn't know, was that the VCBB has benefited from those funds in prior years. And so there's an existing grant agreement, which has supported a number of activities in the past. And there's an allocation for 2022 and 2023 of about $1.25 million. We became aware of this a couple months ago, and as Rob had come here and talked in other places about ways to use that in that competitive grant program, it came together with a request that Vikuda had to Christine and Rob to see whether there was a way to support a few functions that we did not have funding for in the time where, you know, Vikuda's funding is coming from the CUDs and is very minimal because they just don't have operating dollars flowing in yet. And so we had said, is there any way you can help us jumpstart a couple of core activities? And Rob, you know, then moving forward, I think came to this board 2 or 3 meetings ago and said, we're thinking about transitioning that competitive grant that we have an allocation for in 2022 towards a directed grant that could include some support for Vikuda and some other activities. And then we had submitted, Vikuda had put together a list of examples of the types of way we might be able to use that funds. And when we came to the last meeting, what we were really trying to do is get permission for Rob to go off and talk to Northern Borders about changing from a directed grant, I'm sorry, from a competitive grant to a directed grant, and getting the funds released so that then we could go on and do the next layer. And I think there's some great conversation here last time about accountability and what exactly that would look like. And so we were asked to go off and further work on that. And in that conversation, kind of 2 things happen. I'll let Lucy talk about the VCBB piece, and then I can talk about well, actually, Ellie and I will talk about the Vikuda piece.
Sure, thanks, Rob. So on the VCBB side, I guess just to kind of clarify and reiterate, we already have the 1.25 million that we had originally intended to be a competitive grant and are now asking to be a directed grant as kind of the needs have changed since our original proposal, and MBRC has made it clear that they have earmarked an additional 1.25 million that they would like once they get a 1 or 2 pager from us describing our intended use. So from the VCBB side, we would be looking to use the money for a communication and outreach limited service position, for make-ready support, for some contract work we do with the fiber optic services and grant review, and then for additional contract work for as-built on the ground support and inspections, which would be kind of reviewing the construction that has been happening. And then the final item for the grant would be a directed grant to Vikuda that Rob will speak more about, but we see this directly in line with the VCBB directives from Act 71 to be providing resources that are technical and administrative to support communication union districts. And we see this as kind of the gap right now of what we don't have funding for. So we're trying to make sure that we're using all of the various sources of funding in the most productive way. And I'll let Rob speak to the items that would be direct grants to VCUDA.
And I'm going to let Ellie go first, and then I'll do the CFO one.
Okay, sure. So one of the items that we've asked for money for is to expand the program coordination role. So part of that would be to expand the number of hours that we have available from Rob, because he's very part-time at the moment. And I can tell you from my experience working with him the last couple of weeks, we would love to have some more of his time, but we can't afford it at this moment. And then also to have a junior person as well, so that things that don't require senior level expertise can be dealt with by a more junior resource. And some of these things as well would fall into the category of performing services that multiple CUDs are all researching independently rather than centralizing. So, because we are, a number of us are doing similar things and lacking a central resource within VCUDA that actually has capacity to do these things, we all do them ourselves rather than saying, hey, is there someone centrally who can do this once and share the results of these findings with us? So that's one of the things that we would like to have money for, because at the moment we're paying for this through dues to VCUDA. And if we're able to reduce those dues, then we're able to spend that money on what we would like to be spending money on, which is building more miles, building network.
So I would just say, and again, the idea here is this is seed money for, on the VCUDA side for a year or two. We asked for 2 in order to get these positions funded. During that period of time, we expect the revenue to start developing within CUDs, and they would be able to continuously review, do we want to continue this at the end of year 2? Probably would. We think we would, but that would then shift off of grant and onto sustainable funding. The other position we're recommending is a high-level CFO. And a number of folks in the CUDs really agree with this. We've got a little bit of work to do to figure out whether we can find an individual or whether this is really a firm. But the idea here is that given the complexity of all the different federal funding streams, the requirements that will come in for single audits, the need to keep funds distinguished, that each of the CUDs today typically has a bookkeeping organization that they work with and an internal treasurer. But as Ellie mentioned, they're developing their own approach to how they do their chart of accounts, how they do their asset management, how they think about compliance with federal laws. And if we could get someone who's been there, done that, which none of them can afford on their own, frankly, with their limited operating dollars, we think we could advance a lot of the high-level accounting stuff. I'll tell you this, so if you don't do that, you're probably saying, well, didn't they already account for that? Well, of course they did. But we're learning now about the complexity, and we're seeing the opportunity for efficiency. For instance, I think everyone's, from what I can tell, has their own approach to things. If we can get ahead of some of these compliance and alignment issues, it'll make reporting a lot easier. It'll make the audits a lot easier, and some of those other issues. So I wouldn't say this is an entirely unmet need, but there's an understanding now that taking it up a notch would really help across the CUDs. And so those are kind of the 2 priorities that the VCUDA came up with, and following last meetings, we kind of narrowed it down to those 2 as a high priority.
Okay. Laura, you have your hand up. I'll let you go first.
Yes. So I'm not sure who this question would be best directed at. I appreciate the added financial capacity and coordination. That is definitely part of the purpose of the VCBB. And so I'm trying to understand why that role should go with should be at VCUDA as opposed to.
You went on mute, but I think I know what you said.
Yeah, you're muted, Laura.
She's still talking.
Sorry, did you hear anything that I said?
Yeah, just the very
And I
last
guess
bit cut out on us.
I'd like to hear from Christine and Rob about that.
Well, so I can go first. The CUDs feel pretty strongly that, we have a responsibility to have our ducks in order when you all come asking questions. And it shouldn't be the same person. The person asking the question shouldn't be the person preparing the answers. And so in the case of some of this financial reporting, both to the VCBB and to the feds, there has to be someone who has ownership, not on the auditing side, but on the administration side for high-level accounting within CUDs. And so just like each of these organizations have to have as a treasurer makes sense, ultimately someone's signing off for the books in each of the CUDs, and that can't be someone who's also auditing them.
And overseeing grant compliance, which is different than the audit, right? We have to separate the audit where we have auditors from the grant compliance the VCBB does.
Yeah, and let me just, I'll respond that, we're pushing, the CUDs went through the training last week on grant compliance. And we've been pushing the CUDs to add financial capacity at their staff level. What we're saying is here, not every CUD needs to go out and hire a CFO, but they need to, the CUDs themselves need to have the capacity to ensure that they're meeting all their grant reporting requirements. And our original push was for each CUD to have that capacity, but that does end up with a duplication of efforts. The CUDs need to have, every single one of them are being managed or audited and reviewed separately in terms of their grant compliance.
So Christine, can you explain to me your understanding of how this finance person will interact? Like, what's the breakdown of responsibilities with the financial responsibilities with this person and with the VCBB?
Our job is to monitor the grants and oversee grant compliance. When there's a problem, first of all, the reporting needs to show exactly where they're spending the money, and that needs to be accounted for at every CUD. Our job is to monitor those grants. The CUDs have to have the infrastructure in the place to report. We're not going to take responsibility for each CUD's reporting. We're treating each CUD as a separate entity in terms of grant performance. So one CUD could be out of compliance with grant reporting, and the other 9 could be fully in compliance. We're going to focus on that one CUD. They have problems, they need to fix it. If they don't have the capacity to fix it, then we have a problem.
Okay. So, okay. I'm listening to this. I understand it. It is what I'm puzzling about, and I don't think that there's a resolution in this moment, is in establishing the VCBB, the intent was for the VCBB to be, a development kind of a supporter of this, as opposed to a regulatory entity. That was part of the reason for moving the VCBB out, for moving, this development piece out of DPS and establishing the board. So that's the troubling that I'm doing right now. I'm not sure that there is an immediate resolution that I'm not sure there's an immediate resolution. I think, and I guess my biggest troubling, Christine, is thinking about the VCBB becoming more a regulatory entity on the CUDs, and they need to be regulated. They need to be regulated. And so, that's the piece that I am, that's the piece that I'm just troubling over. So.
Laura,
Go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, so, I would say this, the CUDs, each of them, and I'm getting messages, and I am, so I have 2 of them right now as examples, that each of the CUDs, has, as part of their kind of municipal formation, has a treasurer role. But this stuff is really complicated. And, I can tell you, as someone who went through an NTIA grant 10 years ago, it was 3 years in when, frankly, when Congress changed and there was a whole bunch of inquiries and NTIA started looking at all the grants they had given, and so did Congress, that we started getting calls about, various very detailed program rules that we hadn't seen the first 3 years. Thank God we had a grants administration office on our team who understood these rules and had our inventory in order and had our compliance and our policies in order. And so, it's not that we don't have this function. It already exists as a treasurer and an accounting firm in each of the CUDs. But what we're looking for, and this is why it works well as a shared service, is to really get high-level experienced talent, the federal regulations, whatever it is, I forget the number, but there's a specific CFR for grant accounting that will help the CUDs advance their implementation of those things. I think that, as you look at all the other shared services that Lucy talked about, VCBB is gearing up to help on shared services. This is one place where the individual entities really need to take some accountability, their own responsibilities and stuff, so they can talk to all these other organizations. They're going to expect that of them.
Yeah, Brian, I see your hand up. I'm almost done. I don't argue that this capacity is needed. I'm just expressing I'm a little concerned about the posture of the VCBB with these entities, and it could be just because I don't understand it well enough, and I'm not concerned enough to say we should do something else. I'm flagging it as a concern for me. Thank you. Hand down.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Let's move to Brian.
So I guess how do we, what I want to avoid is having this conversation every single time there's a new need that arises. So I think there are some shared functions that should sit at VCUDA. There are some shared functions that should sit at the VCBB. And I think that allocation between the two should be complementary and collaborative and all that. So is it possible yet, or are we just too early to know which positions will have the best impact being cited at VCUDA versus VCBB? Because in the board packet, there was a bunch of language from Act 71 that was sent out about things that the VCBB is required to do. And so I'm not clear on, can the VCBB, if it's allocate something that it's been required to do in Act 71, can they allocate that responsibility to VCUDA and then help them pay for that and staff that? But I don't want to have incremental conversations about, hey, here's a new responsibility. We all need help and expertise. And let's revisit whether this should be a shared service or not. And if so, is it VCUDA or VCBB? Ideally, we'd have that mapped out now, but I think it might be too early to do that. So that's kind of my messy question.
Well,
I don't know who I'm asking. I guess
it's an
Rob and Christine, I'm asking.
Well, it's an interesting question because we don't know what we don't know, right? So we're only telling you what we know. So I can't promise that, conditions aren't going to change. And this position could be held at the VCBB, or it could be held at the VCUDA, but the CUDs need more help in terms of compliant grants. Now so now this gets to where we are in the process. We have to accept where people are in the process. Again, I always say you've got to have a headache to know to take the aspirin. The CUDs laser focused on getting their construction started. That's where they've been. They've been laser focused, get material. They're still laser focused on construction. But we just gave some grant training to the CUDs to increase their awareness of the complexities they're facing in terms of complying with these various grants. Because we have 5 different grant sources and we have to do 5 sources of reporting. So we really want the CUDs to have the infrastructure built in, but they really haven't had a chance to think about it until now. So that is the problem. The problem is we've got an absorption capacity of the CUDs. It's not that the VCBB hasn't been pushing this issue, but you also have to have an awareness of where you are in the process. And Rob V, why don't you add to that?
Yeah, I would just echo, I think it's probably too early to nail all that down. This process to get us to this document actually has been pretty collaborative, and a lot of alignment on the what, like where the gaps are in that list between, you know, what Lucy presented and what we presented. And frankly, we've gone back and forth on the how, because I think, you know, Brian, to your point, boy, it'd be nice to have a chart of what should land where, but it's too early. And frankly, I'm not sure it's working well enough. I'm not sure it matters. As you know, as you think 2 or 3 years out and the CUDs have a revenue stream and they're thinking about this, that'll be a very different moment in time than trying to figure out how to use a grant to jumpstart some missing functions.
Yeah, and I'd say with this capacity, you know, the board, you know, we've had these discussions at the board level about, you know, improved reporting in terms of where the CUDs are, and especially in terms of you know, their take rates and other things that need to come along. So, you know, we really want more detail in terms of reporting. But again, it's, you know, the timing wasn't right to ask for that before.
Got it. Thanks.
So Christine, based on what I'm seeing in the packet and based on this discussion, I think what's before us, and I'm asking this as a question, I think what's before us is the question of approving a submittal to Northern Borders for 2.5 million for a grant request to fund ancillary health that would be housed, some of it would be housed at BCBB and some of it would be housed at VCUDA. Is that the quick synopsis?
Yes, and we have, you know, we're asking permission to talk, not necessarily, you know,
Not to do, just to
Right.
ask for funds,
Right.
funding.
right.
So I have a couple of small questions, but just in general and conceptual, I have no problem with this, but the one caveat I want to put out there is that if we staff up all these functions that are proposed, it's only as good for as long as the funds are, you know, until the grant funds run out. So in the event there are specific positions that are needed long-term, the CUDs are going to have to look at that to weave that into their business model funding if they need these positions long-term for grant compliance and all that. So 2.5 million gets us started, but I just really encourage the CUDs to plan for fees going to VCUDA to fund their needs for a longer term, because we can only fund this as long as the grant dollars are available, and once they're depleted, they're depleted.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Rob,
I see some
Jake.
heads bobbing. I don't think
Yeah.
we need to, you
Yeah.
know, an affirmative on that. One question I had specifically based on the communication that's in our board packet. One of the positions is a communication and outreach position. How does that weave in with Karen's role, if at all?
Well, Heron's role is a temporary role, unfortunately. So we want to be able to turn that into a permanent role.
So we're not looking at two people doing the same thing. It's basically funding Heron more
Yes.
long-term. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's helpful. The make ready support, help me with this one because I don't entirely understand what this means.
Yeah, the make ready has been quite problematic. You know, the CUDs make ready is a very narrow but specialized talent. We're lucky to, you know, NEK managed to find a great make ready resource. We need one more for the rest of the CUDs because you know, we've seen there are cases where the CUDs sometimes could get charged 3 times as much as they should be for make ready. They need to have some experience in terms of write-outs. This make ready person would be that support for the CUDs, kind of a train the trainer role to get the CUDs up to speed on how to do make ready write-outs.
Is it to also negotiate with the electric utilities?
Well, that's the
what
training.
is being
We
charged?
want, yep, that's what we want the CUDs to learn how to do, but it really does require a specialized talent. It's kind of, what we envision here is they're going out on the first couple of ride outs
Yeah,
and teaching the CUDs what to look for, how to correctly make the challenge,
yeah.
and fully educated on rules, get them fully educated on Rule 3700, PSC Rule 3700. So it is considered a train the trainer role.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that belongs at VCBB or at VCUDA, quite honestly.
I guess it could go, I think any of these could be, but it really is about creating that, self-sufficiency. And so we view it as better with VCUDA because it gets closer to the CUDs.
Yeah. All right, so, I mean, we obviously don't need to perfect all of these positions at this point, because at this point, really all we're asking for is approval to go ask for the money.
That's right.
And then if we get the money, we're gonna come back to exactly what we're gonna use it for, is that?
Yeah, we will come back with the grant itself for approval.
And how we're actually gonna use it? Will we get to that level of detail?
Yeah,
I don't
that's
want to
how
micromanage this, but I also want to have some idea of specifics of what it's going to be used for.
Yeah. What you see in your board packet is what our proposal is. That's kind of plan versus actual. You will be able to come in and approve the actual.
Okay, all right. Because I mean, things could change in 6 months to whenever we get that. Assuming we get the 2.5 million.
2.5 million, right?
2.5 million. We are here today, and then let's say we get it in 6 months. A lot can change in that 6-month period, so I want to make sure we are coming back to the specifics of what you're going to use the dollars for. I don't want to micromanage it, but it's good to know what the dollars are used for and have a general conversation of use.
Yeah, this is an approval for a submission, not approval for acceptance. That'll come later.
Any other questions at this point? Better put a motion on the table. I move that we approve staff submitting a $2.5 million request to the NDRC for how do I word this? For general support as outlined in the packet.
Second.
I think I heard a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, thanks, Dan. Dan seconded that. Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, ayes carried. Good luck. That's a great effort. I hope we get it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's item 4. Let's move to item 5, which is the FCCC broadband map.
Yeah, in this case, Heron will do the presentation with my support, and we'll make sure I'll provide the technical details, but Heron will provide the overview. Heron is actually leading that outreach. Go ahead, Heron.
All right, thank you.
You can share your screen and
Yes, I will do that. Thank you, everyone. I will share my screen and get our presentation up here. Okay, so we are going to overview our strategy for our challenges. There are 2 separate challenges. There's a bulk challenge and there's an individual challenge. So we'll start with our bulk challenge strategy. Step 1 is identify locations worth a challenge. Now there are 4 priorities here. Locations reported served where evidence shows infrastructure is not present or ready. Priority 2 is locations where licensed wireless or DSL is claimed to exceed speeds of 25.3 and neither cable nor fiber is present. Priority 3, identify any discrepancy between the FCC maps and the PSD data. And priority 4, producing challenges where providers' network does not have capacity to serve all addresses.
Now let's just pause for a moment on this slide, because this is really the challenge that the BCBB is going to do with the help of the CUDs. So we're going to be doing this right from the GIS maps with the information we have at hand. Does that make sense to the board? Okay, go to the next slide. Thanks.
Okay. Step 2 of our bulk challenge strategy is investigate any sites we have reason to believe are incorrect in the PSD and FCC maps and determine what type of evidence must be gathered to challenge these sites. Christine?
Yeah, so this one, this is really data gathering. We don't, as we get into the detail sites, we're going to be prioritizing the outreach that we'll be doing. Go to the next slide.
Okay. Step 3 in our bulk challenge strategy is direct outreach to consumers at the triage locations to gather information to strengthen those challenges or encourage individual challenges.
So this gets to ties back to the previous slide. Previous slide is to identify where we should put our efforts. We have only till January 13th to do this. So, we're not going to hit every 30 or 40,000 addresses that we believe are a problem. But with the help of the CUDs and the outreach, we're going to triage in terms of where we focus our efforts. Go ahead.
Okay. And step 4 of our bulk challenge strategy is to research and present evidence on how various technologies perform in real life conditions in Vermont and challenge those locations.
That gets down to actual performance versus the actual performance versus the reported performance. And I'm sure many of you experienced this where you're told that you get a solid 25.3 and you only get 8.1, where this is happening throughout locations throughout the state. We know wireless, for example, when you get out to the fringe areas of the transmitter, clearly there are problems, and the problems get worse during the summer when the leaves are full on the trees. But that's we need to continue to provide evidence. This is an iterative process, by the way, with the FCC. The FCC does not see this process ending. Basically, the first step, January 13th, that's the big one. That determines how much money we're going to receive from the BEAD infrastructure program. The BEAD infrastructure program provides a statewide minimum of $100 million, plus an allocation based on every unserved address, unserved and underserved, but unserved is really focus. That's where they're taking the federal money and divide it evenly. So that the January 13th is real money. Beyond that, it's continuing to prove it's an iterative process working with the PSD to improve those processes, improve the maps as we move forward. Go ahead.
Okay. And then some additional steps we are considering submitting additional locations that have E911 addresses and could be considered unserved by the FCC, even if they do not appear on the PSD map. VCBB staff proposed to other states that the initial $100 million allocation is distributed before allocations are determined, and we did call for the challenge process to be extended to allow more time for the challenges. A sign-on letter is being circulated by the NGA with several states signing on. We are meeting with providers to ask them to change inaccurate data, and we're also engaging with the media to spread the word on the challenge process and the problems with the FCC map. Okay,
Is that it? Are we done?
That's it for the bulk challenge. I can move on to the individual unless there are questions.
Yeah, I'm sure the board has I'm thinking I know a question the board is going to ask. So at the end, I might even. Well, I don't want to. I'm sure a board member will ask it, but I'll make sure.
Yeah, let's go through the whole presentation and then we'll open it up.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the individual challenge strategy. Step 1 is our press release calling for all Vermonters to check their addresses on the FCC map, challenge the information listed if it's inaccurate. This release went out on Thursday. We've had quite a bit of attention on it. So hopefully the word is starting to get out there. Step 2 is we are going to send out some letters to ask big employers, universities, hospitals to inform their employees, students, and patients about this process and the importance of it. That's something we are working on right now. Step 3 is outreach through the CUDs. I have given all the CUDs some materials, including suggested website content, an article for their newsletters, and a social media suggested post if they want to use them. Of course, you know, they all have their own communications practices, and so they can decide how they want to use those. Step 4 is once we determine specific areas to target that have high numbers, we're going to do more outreach. We're going to pitch story ideas to local newspapers, make it as easy as possible, hopefully with contact information of people to interview for good stories, possibly send out postcards with QR codes to make it really easy to file a challenge, maybe send information with electric bills or school newsletters, possibly Facebook ads, or even going into communities with mobile devices ready to help residents actually file challenges. So these are all possibilities once we narrow this down. That is the end. That's the end of the presentation and the end of our summing up our strategy. So we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, before we open to questions, one of the things I'll point out is that right now the FCC does not require performance reporting at the address level. And this is really part of the effort to make sure that we hold the telcos to be more transparent and accountable.
So Christine, by that you mean I wouldn't have to do a speed test to submit for a challenge?
Well, at the bulk challenge, if you go to the FCC map, no, they don't. We're not necessarily asking for speed tests at this point. We're trying to get more accountability with it. What I've already started meeting with providers to say, look, you show these addresses as served and they're not served. You know, let's address that. So you know, ultimately, we want the telecom to be a little more straightforward with the reporting. Not all of the same. I want to be careful.
And in fact, with individual challenges, speed doesn't matter at all. The FCC is taking the word of people, of the providers, and their advertised speed. So saying that you don't have that speed is not an effective challenge at all. You could file it as a complaint. Really doesn't do any good. What they told us was the gold standard for a challenge is a consumer calls the provider, they say it's not available at your address, and then that's the best thing they told us. That could be a challenge, but speed is not going to be really considered for a challenge at all.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Karen, just a general comment. The approach of hitting all of the above ways of communicating is spot on, because not everybody does Facebook, not everybody reads a press release, so it's got to be all of the above. And really, thank you for that widespread hit list of methods and ways to communicate. So I like that. Laura has her hand up.
Great. Christine, can you just explain to me, so I heard you say you're reaching out to providers and letting them know that, you know, you're claiming service here and there is no service here. You just explain a little bit of the interplay. So is that not something, and maybe if Rob's still on, so that's not something that the CUDs are doing. You're doing that on the CUDs behalf, kind of aggregating that information. We have one, and you're reaching out on behalf of a number of CUDs. Where's the connection there or coordination at the CUD level?
Yeah, the coordination, it comes to us because these telecom providers are cross CUDs. So it
Right.
makes sense for us to do it. It actually makes sense for me to do it personally because
Right.
it's a challenging conversation.
Yep. So it's coming to you from the CUD level.
Yes.
You're kind of aggregating the issues and reaching out.
Yes, that's exactly
Great.
what's happening.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Christine, there's no action required. This is just an update, right?
No, this update just to get, raise any concerns and make sure the board understands what we're doing.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for the great work, and hopefully a bunch of people go out and check their locations. I'm going to check mine right after this meeting. All right, let's go on. Next item on our agenda is the mission statement for the VCBB, and I'm going to tee this one up. Right, in our packet is an email that I sent out. Laura and I had been going back and forth about kind of a mission statement, a purpose statement. And we went to the legislation, and very clearly in the legislation is a purpose statement in section 81, and I've included that in the board packet for a purpose. Basically, my proposal is to take that paragraph or purpose statement under section 8081 and make that our, we call it mission, but that's the purpose of the VCBB. And there's been 2 suggested changes to the language. Brian had suggested the second sentence list the word purpose a second time. What I'd like to do is just change that. Instead of say the VCBB's purpose is to coordinate, facilitate, support, etc., just to say the VCBB was created to coordinate, facilitate, support. So we just don't have purpose in 2 different sentences. So that is one proposal change. Second change comes from Vicuda, and they would like to, at the end of the paragraph, to add to it by eligible entities. And I'd like
sorry,
to
what was that?
Rob to, what's that?
What was that, Patty? I didn't hear you.
Vicuda would like to add to the very end of this new words after universal community broadband solutions, add to it by eligible entities. What I'd like to do is invite Rob to explain why they think that specific language is necessary.
Thank you, Patty. As we reviewed this, obviously the document closely follows the statute and made total sense to us. And all the language came from the statute. By eligible entities refers to something else that's also in the statute, which is that the funding and the purpose of the VCBB is to support CUDs in collaboration with a provider, and a small provider that's defined by the number of counties they serve. And so just adding this to the purpose statement kind of narrows it down that it's those entities that the VCB is supporting, not all entities.
Okay, Rob, my initial reaction to that language was I understand. I think I understood why you put it in there, and certainly it dovetails to what you just said verbally. I just don't see that it's needed, and I'm trying to limit what we have in this purpose statement to keep it as tight as possible to the language in section 8081. So in my head, I don't think it's necessary.
Patty, we had that conversation with our group, and I think, to be honest, our group recognized that there are kind of 2 things that happen when you write a mission statement like this. One is that you get a mission statement which has words in it, and the other one is you go through the process of understanding what it means. And so it would be nice to have these words in there, but frankly, we've had the conversation, so I don't disagree with you.
Okay. And certainly in the definition section in the statute, I'm holding up my dovetailed statute language here. There is the definition of what an eligible entity is. So I just don't see it's necessary in this purpose statement. Okay, Laura?
Yeah, Patty, I want to thank you for your work on this. I appreciate it, and your patience kind of working through this with me. I want to thank the CUDs for thinking through this and offering suggestions. I am comfortable with this language because it is the VCBB's mission statement. The law is still the law. And so, you know, where there is contradiction, we can refer to the law. So I think this is great. I think this is a good, I think this is good. And for me, you know, it's important that, you know, we're clear that our role is supporting the CUDs and community broadband, accelerating that work.
Mhm. So I'd like to ask the board if they are fine with the one suggested change that I had, which is again, at the second sentence in the purpose statement, rather than the VCBB's purpose is to coordinate, it would state VCBB is created to coordinate. Just removing the word purpose there. Anybody have any objections to that?
No,
No.
Patty?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to, and just to be, I don't know if provocative is the word, but I guess it's not provocative. It's where I think we've had the, maybe some disagreement or lack of, consensus before. So with this purpose statement, it is not the purpose of it is not the job of the VCBB to ensure universal broadband throughout the state. And there's a difference between those two things. So it is the job to support and accelerate community broadband buildouts. It is not the job.
But we disagree, Laura, that it is clearly spelled out in Act 71 that our job is to get universal service for the state.
Okay, so I disagree. I find it really surreal to argue about this.
Christine, I think the message is it's not a singular purpose.
No, it's not, but it's certainly not our job to ignore unserved addresses in the state. With this,
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think we completely get that, but the other words that are part of this purpose statement are really important. And that includes community efforts,
Yeah, of course,
achieving universal service, reliable, high quality, affordable. Like there's other words in here other than just universal service.
That's true, but it doesn't exclude universal service.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with that. But it's tying it in with the community efforts and community broadband is really important because it links us to the CUDs. I think.
Yeah, I have no argument with the mission statement as written.
Okay, but I think what you're hearing is rather than just focus singular on universal service, there's a broader picture in this purpose statement.
No question about it. I've never said anything different.
So where this can make a difference is, for instance, when we bring a policy to this board to consider, I cannot conceive of a time that we would bring a policy to this board to consider that it would not first have been discussed with the CUDs.
Unless there's a town that's not incorporated with the CUD, that's in the legislation.
Well, so then you would have discussed it with that town.
Yes, absolutely. That's where I'm going. There's in the legislation, it talks about CUDs and towns that are not part of the CUD. So that's what I'm referring to.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So it is a fine distinction, but I'm going to say it one more time. As a legislator who has focused for the last 8 years on telecommunications policy and has taken a leadership role in writing Act 71 and Act 79 and reviewing the 10-year telecommunications policy, et cetera, it is my belief that there is no entity in the state of Vermont whose job it is to get every single Vermonter service. The entity that comes closest to that is the VCBB, who is supporting the community efforts and accelerating the community efforts. And the community efforts are only done at a universal level. So there could be towns that are excluded that refuse to participate.
Oh, Laura, I think you may have nailed, yes. You nailed it. That's really, you got to the issue. We're in firm agreement. In other words,
Great.
the town has to approach us, the communities have to approach us.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not your job to go and resolve for Acme Town
Yes.
that is not dealing with this. Acme Town
Okay.
and their residents are unfortunately out of luck if they will not participate at the community level, either with their provider or with a CUD. They are out of luck.
We've
Not your job to
been
chase
in
them.
agreement all along, Laura.
There we go. Great. Thank you, Patty. Again, I'm
Thanks,
done
Patty.
and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura, for your
Yep.
pushing this forward and having us dive into this. Without your leadership, we would not be here talking about it. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we approve the purpose statement / mission statement as proposed with a minor edit that I've suggested on the second line. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Thank you.
We are now on item 8, staff updates.
Yeah, a general update, of course, we provide the detailed updates in the weekly, but I will emphasize that we're doing a lot of work preparing the digital equity plan. We reached out to a number of, we're building a core advisory team for the digital equity plan. We've reached out to a number of organizations, but key are the libraries, key are the rural regional planning commissions, key is equal access to broadband, just to name a few. But we are building a core team. When we get those agreements, we plan on, we'll update the board on what the core team is. That core team is solely to provide us advisory on the required digital equity plan, which we received a $518,000 grant for. We have about 10 months to develop that plan. The NTIA requires an approved digital equity plan prior to releasing the BEAD infrastructure grant at this point. So we've got those two kind of go hand in hand.
Laura has her hand up.
Thank you. This was the place that I had a question, and Christine, you will be so surprised by my question. How are you involving the CUDs in the planning process for the NTIA grants?
The CUDs, of course, they're key, and they are going to be on the core advisory team. Yes.
Okay.
We're not going to do anything without their support.
Thank you.
Laura, was that your question you wanted to pose in this section?
It was. Thanks,
Okay.
Patty.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we got to it. Okay, anything else on that item, Christine?
Nothing on that. Alyssa, anything on the dashboard?
I just included a screenshot of the hub, which is where the dashboards live, where the map apps that we're creating with Stone live, and where all the data layers can be accessed publicly. So Christine, I believe, shared that link with the board, and just wanted to highlight kind of how it's set up, and that the dashboards will be front and center and added as we continue to add more information to share.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. I love these visuals, so I just want to give you a kudos for the work you're doing on this.
Thanks.
And Heron has a couple, the press updates, those are daily, so Heron's got an update on that.
Yes, thank you. You have most of the links for stories since the last board meeting in your packet. Most of that was about the inaccuracies in the FCC map. There were a couple of our CUD executive directors who were featured. Sean Keogh was named one of Fiber Forward Magazine's Fiber Under 40 for his work. There was also an article in VT Digger on Maple Broadband hiring Ellie DeVilliers as its executive director. Then we have had some additional coverage after our press release went out. So Friday, we had coverage on our call for Vermonters to check their addresses and file challenges. We had stories in Consumer Reports, VT Digger, WCAX did something. They've also asked us for another interview for this week, Vermont Business Magazine and the Bennington Banner. So we've had some attention on that. Also today, there was a piece, a commentary in VT Digger from Representatives Sevilla and Sims, which was a nice piece. Was a nice piece and thought I might mention here at the meeting, and that sums up all our coverage.
Great, thank you.
Lucy, Lucy's going to give us an update on Lamoille, I believe.
Yes, so for construction grants, we have had one submission, which is from Lamoille FiberNet. We are hoping that they will be ready to be brought up at the January board meeting. And the later in the meeting, when we vote on the data policy, that will also be helpful for Lamoille in making sure that they have clear direction as to what data to be used, what map data to be using. We've met with Otter Creek CUD to start to walk them through what the construction grant process looks like. So they're at the stage of, they're probably still a little ways out from submitting a pre-application, and then we'll be submitting the application in the coming months after that. And then we are meeting with Northwest on Wednesday, and we'll have more of a status update after that.
And Kristen will give us an update on grant.
Yep, just a couple things to know. Not too much. We're working on the Southern Vermont grant agreement for the construction grant award. Mostly drafted. Just trying to tighten some stuff up. So hopefully later this week or early next week we'll be able to get that signed and ready to go. All the monthly performance reports that we're doing 11/15 have been received and reviewed. Nothing really crazy to note there. No concerns that I had going through those. And then, as we've already mentioned a little bit, is we did have the uniform guidance training on 12/7, which was last Wednesday. It was really well attended. It was kind of the foundational training, so we hope to roll out some, more in-depth trainings after the new year. So that's all I have.
Thank you. That's it for staff updates.
Okay, great, thank you. Holly is not on yet, so let's just keep going through the agenda. We will push for the VCBB data policy before the end of this meeting. So let's do the CUDA update.
Great.
Rob, you're...
I'm not on mute, right? Okay. Thank you and happy holidays to folks. I'm just going to give a couple updates on kind of the shared activities we're doing, and then we'll see if any of the CDs have any specific things. First, we've mentioned this before. We've completed a short list of legislative items that were passed unanimously by VCUDA and our members at our special meeting on December 6th. As we said before, the most significant items in that are a draft of a plan of merger modeled on the municipal merger statute that would allow two CUDs to combine if they wanted to. We don't have an example of that yet, but it seems like one of those things that we should be prepared for. A request to allow the municipal employees that will be working at the CUDs to participate in the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System. And then finally, the ability to issue for the Secretary of State to issue certificates of good standing to CUDs as they apply for grants, which is something that is in statute authorizing Secretary of State for a number of other entities, and it's just something that we'd like to see added to the CUDs. Those are the substantive additions. The other ones are kind of technical corrections. Instead of having a specific day in October to do the budget, say in the month of October on or before, same thing for the annual meeting, et cetera. So most of the other ones are just very minor technical corrections, but the plan of merger, participation in Beamers, and the certificate of good standing are kind of the new ideas.
Rob,
talked
on the merger piece, you need specific language legislatively to be enforced before a CD could merge?
There is language in the statutes about how municipalities can merge. And there's some fairly complicated things in terms of how you transfer assets and how contracts transfer and, what it would mean for obligations to transfer. And so we do think it's good to have it modeled before it happens. Ray Pelletier did a lot of work together with FX and Irv and some input from Stan as well to kind of model that. And the initial feedback we got from was that, look, legislative council will have to come up with how they want to approach it, whether they want to keep it small or whether they want to have a detailed activity. But we did lay out what we think should be there. And as we kind of hand it off, we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm happy to share it with you all. I think at this point, we've approved it, so we can send that along to you if you want to see it.
Okay. Christine, have you had a chance to look at Vicuta's legislative plans?
No, I have not had a chance to look at it. They may have provided it to me, but I haven't looked at it yet.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're going hand in hand, as both groups are going hand in hand. So
that's great.
We don't want VCBB going it alone. We also don't want Vicuta going it alone. So we want to make sure there's dialogue with both entities.
Yeah, we did review this at our meeting, which VCBB staff was at 2 weeks ago. I don't think we actually transmitted it. So, and the minutes haven't been approved, so they haven't gone out yet. So we'll take care of that.
Okay.
Okay. And I agree completely with the idea that it's a two-way street. So thank you for that. A couple other items we worked on. The shared services draft was a big item of discussion, obviously, and finding focus in that. The statement of purpose. FCC mapping is a big issue for the CUDs. And, obviously, like the staff, we recognize that there's a significant upside to having both the fabric, the listing of addresses, correct with the maximum number of eligible Vermont addresses listed in the FCC database. And also, as we spoke at previous meetings, there are some areas where providers have claimed that they offer fiber service where there's no fiber on the poles. There are some areas where, fixed broadband wireless is alleged that we hear from constituents that they cannot order it. And so, those things could have an impact on Vermont. There's a lot of interest in getting these maps as correct as possible. And also there's a resource issue over the holidays for this January 13th deadline to get the submissions in. So we appreciate the work that's going on. We are still fighting through some data sharing activities. I think there might have been some progress on that this morning, actually. But just kind of, I think as the update said, trying to understand on a shared basis, what is the problem and how big is it? And then how in this very limited amount of time, and it's actually a month now, today's the 12th, the 13th of January is the due date. How do we get this done over the holidays? So a lot of interest in getting past the frustrated stage and getting to the acting stage on that. We're going to talk about the data policy. And a few minutes, I would just highlight that this was a very collaborative process. Stan provided an initial draft. Vicuta had several committee meetings where we went through and came up with suggested changes and questions and other things. We submitted those back to Stan. He accepted a lot of them. We certainly felt like it was a productive process. We didn't get everything that we wanted in there. But we did go through and hear why they didn't feel some of the things we wanted shouldn't be in there, and accept that reasoning that Stan brought up with the staff at VCBB, and feel really good about the teamwork and getting to where we got to in the policy. So, and then the last item on my list, just kind of as a general update, is Christine mentioned this. Make ready is still an issue, and we're seeing kind of uneven practices in some of the activities across some of the poll owners. And, as we end this year and start next year, it is really important. Again, back to that efficiency and being able to represent that we are being good stewards of public dollars and spending them evenly, that we learn a little bit more, frankly. We get a better understanding of the practices, and I don't think anyone's in a position where we're willing to say anything other than we need to learn more. And once we learn more, we need to enforce more probably. And so that added resource, the expertise will certainly help as it comes online. But even in the interim, we will need to do more work to keep on top of that. So I think that's the update. I don't know that anyone on our team wanted to make additional comments, but take questions while we're waiting to see.
Okay. We also have the public comment period. People can jump up for that.
Okay.
Any questions of Rob? Comments? Okay. Hearing none.
Thank you.
That brings us to public comment. Thank you, Rob.
Yep, I'll manage the public comments, and we're open for public comments. Anybody can speak. Just recognize you'll be able to give in 3 minutes. And Leslie Caldwell has her hand raised. Go ahead, Leslie. You might be on mute, Leslie, if you've heard us.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. There were many, sorry about the sun. Actually, I'm not sorry about the sun, but I'm sorry about the sun shining in your face. I just have brief comments. My name is Leslie Cadwell. I'm here today on behalf of Mansfield Community Fiber and Stowe Cable Systems to offer comments on the VCBB's overbuild and data policies. As folks here know, both Mansfield Community Fiber and Stowe Cable Systems currently offer broadband services to Vermont residents, together serving customers in the towns of Underhill, Cambridge, Jeffersonville, Stowe, Fletcher, Fairfax, and Waterville. Both providers offer internet service at speeds that exceed 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. Appropriately, and as the VCBB recognizes, state and federal law seek to prioritize public funding for broadband networks in areas that don't have access to broadband at the minimum speeds of 25 megabits per second and download and 3 megabits per second upload. And to ensure that grants are awarded consistent with that prioritization, the overbuild policy should provide clear standards that further clarify the broad principles set out in the board's enabling legislation, specifically 30 VSA 8086F. For example, how will the board apply the terms incidental and cost effective to a proposal to overbuild in an area already served? In addition, as just recently discussed, awards have to be based on accurate and up-to-date data on unserved and underserved areas. Clarifying the broad outlines of the data and overbuild policies with more specifics will provide predictability for grant applicants as well as the VCBB when reviewing applications and awarding public funds. It's also consistent with the public interest in transparency and accountability. Mansfield Community Fiber and Stowe Cable Systems appreciate the opportunity to comment today. And we look forward to providing additional recommendations and more specifics in writing on the overbuild and data policies consistent with the public interest in expanding broadband to all Vermonters. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Going once, going twice. I do not see any hands, so we can move to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, let's hit a parking lot before we come back to the data and overbuild policy. Want to go through the parking lot, Christine?
Sure. If anybody on the team can pull up the parking lot, that'd be great because I'm on a separate computer. But I will go through the parking lot items that are open.
We do have it in the board packet. So
okay, excellent.
Page through. I don't think it needs
okay,
to
good. So the first item on the parking lot is the VCBB approach to mapping a strategy. We presented that strategy here. So I would say that's closed. We will keep the board updated as to the progress of that mapping challenge in our weekly updates as well as board meetings moving forward. So we are going to invite the delegation to the January board meeting. The existing policy of addressing enforceability with partners is ongoing. We recognize we need a plan for that, but there's still quite a few open items. Finalizing the subsequent overbuild policy, a data policy that was intended to be well, we could continue discussion, put it this way, at this meeting. We'll be presenting the dashboard in January as planned, and the mission statement, you've approved of it in this meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, Laura, you have your hand up?
Christine, just double checking, when we have the delegation come in, have you reached, so whose offices are you having come in?
We are going to reach out to all three of our delegation, the Congress and Senate, Peter Welch, Bernie's office, as well as Becca Bailey.
Okay, great. Okay, I just wanted to ensure that we were reaching out to Becca. She's pretty engaged in this policy here, so we'll make sure we keep her moving.
Great.
Connected.
All right, anything else on the parking lot?
Nope, nothing else at this point.
All right, so let's launch into the data and overbuild policy.
You want me to start the introduction of that? And
yeah, why don't you tee it up for us, Christine?
okay, on the data build policy, we had basically, as Rob said, we had gone through and basically done everything the board asked for. And then the last meeting, there were some changes, and Holly, I met with Holly Friday to discuss this, but she originally committed to get those changes in the Wednesday prior to the board meeting. Then she kicked it off to Friday and then sent them at the last minute. That caused quite a bit of stress, put it that way, because there were major changes to the policy. So she and I talked at 4 o'clock on Friday. And we agreed to a couple things. One is, she recognizes that she was late and that the problem that created. So she indicated she was willing to take the policy that we created with Laura's red line changes in it and approve of that, with the understanding of the board that we were going to amend that later, just so we could start moving. So I suggest we go through the policy that we presented to you with the red lines from Laura and go through that thoroughly. The real thing learning that we had was in this breakdown, and I discussed this with Holly, is, first of all, I need to be, I clearly was not involved enough with this policy. And, we do view Holly as being an excellent, a good contributor to creating a high quality policy. But, this idea of throwing it back over the wall back and forth isn't working. So what Holly and I agreed to is we will, in future policy discussions, our practice will go as follows. It'll be Stan, myself, and Holly who write the policies for the board. We'll do that together rather than going back and forth. And the idea will be to meet with the board to first of all, understand from you all of the concerns and all of the things that you think need to be put in that policy. Then the three of us will go write it, and then we'll bring it back to the board, because this bouncing back and forth just doesn't work practically because of the impact on the schedule. And Lamoille is particularly impacted by this delay. So we have received agreement from Holly that as long as the board recognizes and we put that in the motion, that we will amend this in the future, we will come back to the board with that amendment that meets all three of our needs. So it would be Stan, myself, and Holly going back and meet with the CUDs with Holly's changes and negotiate those through, because those changes also have, I know Rob V met with Holly as well to express the concern about some of those changes haven't been vetted. Yet from a timeline standpoint, we're really impacting Lamoille because, Lamoille can't bring their proposal in without these changes. And, now they have to start make ready. They have to start ordering materials, and, they're really running the risk of missing the spring startup. So that's where we are.
Christine, can you help connect the dots for me a little bit more about why this holds Lamoille up if we didn't take action?
Well, because they don't know what the changes are going to be, and they need these changes.
Well, I guess the question I have is if the board, if we approve this with the changes that Laura suggested, I'm looking at a red line version that you sent out via email. But if we make a change in another month or so, will that trip Lamoille up some way?
Well, it could if we go backwards. The issue really gets down to the incidental overbuild question. That 20% was, we picked that number, but meanwhile, the federal government includes, and we even got confirmation that it wasn't the original intent to be 20%. The original intent, and the intent of the federal government is really explicit. This lines us up with Treasury or BEAD rules and NTIA rules. The grants we receive, the NTIA defines incidental as, it's not incidental build if you're building to try to build into a competitive area. But if you're going out to build a fiber knot line to serve underserved and unserved addresses, the NTIA says that you could put drops anywhere along that line. We're more restrictive than that, which really significantly negatively impacts the business plans.
So I have a question, Patty.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
So I don't know if this is the case for Lamoille, but I was aware of this being an issue in some of our northern CUDs. So we have some providers that have raced to build middle mile fiber and have not built out past that to kind of lock up territories, it would seem. That's what it looks like they're doing, and maybe box out the CUDs. So I would want to make sure, like, having to build over the top of that in order to get to the unserved people feels like an incidental overbuild to me. If they are, and also I want to again make sure that I'm clear that we are not creating a constantly shifting end goal for the CUDs here. That's impossible. So we have to be we cannot do that. So we have to be very careful about that.
Yeah, that's why taking out that 20% and lining it up with the NTIA makes it much more flexible in the long run and avoids the issue that you're saying, Laura. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
I was going to comment and back up what Laura was saying, is that to build middle mile for the sake of locking up territory, there might be an appearance of that, but I think the intent of restricting overbuild was to restrict head to head, where you already have drops to all of these households and then trying to go there again. That kind of overbuild, not in our best interest, where we could be reaching out to others. But if they're not served, they're not served. And that's just in support of what Laura said.
So Christine, the idea here is for the board to take action on this version dated 12/12 with some changes in the very beginning on the first page to reflect community broadband references. The intent is to come back to this, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Holly's issue isn't really to change the policy. She just wants to add some more detail to firm it up.
Okay. All right,
which so she basically, our agreement was the board, approves this policy with the understanding that we will come back and amend it
okay.
by further detail.
But the thrust of the policy remains as is.
Yes,
Anything we're gonna change going forward is gonna be nibbling on the edges.
yeah, providing the detail that, that Holly, there was, yeah, there's, I don't think there's no harm in putting more words around how we're going to how we're going to ensure this is policy, but I think the real message is Holly, Stan, and I are going to start doing these policies together, and we'll amend this policy together.
Okay, and I just want to point out that, for this particular policy, Holly has volunteered to be the point guard. The next policy, it could be Brian, it could be Dan, it could be Laura, so it's not always going to be Holly. So she's not
Yeah, well,
assigned-
I think the point is, I thank you. I think
she's not
I'm with you on
assigned
that.
from the boards. She's not assigned from a board seat to be the policy person. We'll take that up on a case-by-case basis, but in this particular situation, she has raised issues, and we've appointed her to be the spokesperson to get, to make those finalizations of the particular issues she identified at the last meeting.
Yeah, my request to the board, formal request, is when we're writing policy, I would like a board member on that team, on our team, policy writing team. So, because I don't want to get into this.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, Laura, you have your hand up still, or?
You hit my point, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to call it. Let's put a motion on the floor that we approve the draft version dated 12/12 with red lines to include reference to community broadband on the first page. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, approve it with the understanding that we will come back with an amendment at some later date for further.
All right, thank you. Yep, that's a friendly amendment that we will revisit this policy for known changes expressed by Holly. We will revisit this policy. That is a friendly amendment. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor with the amendment to the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we are on to the last item of our agenda is to confirm the next meeting date. And we are moving to once a month. So that brings our next meeting to January. It's the second Monday of the month, so it's January 9th. Is that correct, Christine?
Yes, I think that's, did we say that? Anybody else on the staff? I haven't been following this close enough. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
January
Yes.
9th.
I just need a yes.
Supposed to be
from
the
somebody else.
second Monday of the month.
Okay, great.
Which is January 9th, and the plan would be noon to 4.
Okay,
Okay, anything else before I put a motion to adjourn?
So
Laura,
I just want to say, I'm going to say it, I'm skeptical that we can do this once a month. And I hope I'm wrong.
okay, game on. We'll take that as a challenge to be very efficient about our agendas and as we move forward, making this happen.
You know,
You're on mute.
Patty, I mean, it's hard to think about a larger public works, publicly funded project that is happening in the state of Vermont right now. So that's where my skepticism comes from. So
Understood. I also look at how many dollars we have already approved, and we have a few more CUDs to come in. So I'm hopeful we can do this, and if we can't, then we'll go back to every other week.
Well, and we have an amazing team, and the CUDs are getting really organized, well organized, they're well staffed. And so, you know, but I want to make sure that we keep doing our job, you know, I mean,
Okay.
okay.
Well said, very much agreed. All right, I'm going to put a motion on the table that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned at 1:48. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have great
Happy New Year.
holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody. Yeah.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.